Hello folks, this is part number 3 of rebuilding the engine of old Rusty. And in part number 2 we prepared the block to receive all the new parts or the reconditioned parts. Unfortunately, the crankshaft is still in the machine shop and isn't ready yet. I hope to get it by next week, but nevertheless we can continue with installing a lot of other things. We're going to install the camshaft. We're going to check it out, measure it out, making sure that it fits properly in the bearings in the block. Then we check out the followers on top of the camshaft. Then we look on the push rods, and then we'll install the cylinder sleeves. We'll insert the pistons into it, and we connect the conrods to the pistons. Once that is done, we're going to carry on by inspecting the oil pump and adjusting the oil pump, because there's going to be a bit of work on that oil pump. So, a lot of stuff to be done today. So without any further ado, let's get on and start with the camshaft. And this is the camshaft, and in the previous video we polished out all the surfaces. We polished the cams but also the bearing areas. And now we're going to check that the bearing areas are having the right dimensions compared to the bearing which is inside the block. So that we will do with a micrometer. Now, I know people mentioned that a lot of the cams are a bit pitted, and you're absolutely right. Several cams are actually really pitted, but it don't matter really, because this is a follower, and the follower is going to sit on a cam, like so. Now, while that's rotating, see, this is a big surface, and it's not going to be any issue that we have a little bit of pitting on that, as long as it's not abrasive. And that's why I polished it. So that should be good. So the follower is going to be sitting on the cam, and then on top of that, you will have what we call the push rod. Now, the push rod has a ball side and it has a concave side, or a pocket size. The ball side fits inside the follower, and the pocket size fits into the rocker, which is all the way on the top of the cylinder head. So first of all, I'm going to check that the bearing area of the camshaft is still round and not tapered and has the right dimensions. And therefore I'm going to measure this with a micrometer in 3 different directions. A vertical one like this, and one like that. And I will mark down these readings, and that will tell me if the bearing area is still round, not tapered, and still having the right dimensions. So let's do that. To measure the bearing areas, we're going to use a micrometer, and I'm using one between 25 and 50 mil. They come in different sizes. So let's see if we can clamp it on in the first direction, and I'm going to open that up. There we go. I'm going to close it and see until it's a bit tight. It's still a bit loose. Alright, this feels better. So now I have to do the right size. And the size I'm having is 43. I measure in the other direction. That feels good. 43. I'm going to measure in this direction, and that also feels good. So I know this area is round and not tapered. Let's do the same on this side. Yeah, that feels good and good. So the bearing is 43 mil, 0.45. 43.45 millimeters. I know some people made a comment on me that I was saying mil, but I'm a European and I use the metric system. When I say mil, I actually mean millimeters, not to be confused with the inch mil statement. All right, so that's good. 43.45 millimeters. That's the exact dimension of this bearing area. So now the next thing we need to do is to start measuring the opening in the block and see how big that is. And this is the bearing in the block where the camshaft is going into. And now we need to measure the same 3 dimensions. Checking the diameter of the bearing is going to require a dial bore gauge. All what you have is a dial on the top, and at the bottom you have kind of an attachment, and here is such an attachment. And inside you put a certain piece stiffed, or a piece of metal, and you have plenty of them laying over here. You can see this comes out, and then that together makes a certain distance. So between this point right there and that point, we actually have a very specific dimension. I already have the small one fitted on here, and I used a 40 millimeter extension together with a spacer of 3 mil. So I know that this point to that point is exactly 43 mil, and we know that we measured the bearing to 43.45. So now we should be good. I just zeroized the dial here, and now we can go ahead and measure. Here's the gauge, and we're just going to push it in, and we'll measure in all directions until you have the maximum reading on the dial. So the maximum reading is about 60. Then we turn it around in the other angle, and we're going to do the same thing. And I got about the same reading. Again, in the other direction, and it's also 60, as you can see. So I think all by all, this is quite good. You do the same thing in the back of the bearing. So that's checking for tapering. So what we can say about this bearing is that it's actually round, and it is also not tapered, and the total dimension is 43.60 millimeters. So we can conclude that the camshaft bearing area was 43.45, and I'm cheating a bit because I wrote it down, and that the actual opening of the bearing itself is 43.60. Now that makes a difference of 0.15 millimeters. Now that is a play that will exist between the camshaft and this bearing. And that's very important because the camshaft is gliding on a layer or a coat of oil inside the bearing, because it's actually the oil that makes it glide. And that's why you have an oil channel coming down in here. You see that? That's where the oil channel is, and it's going to grease or oil this whole area, and the camshaft will float on it. You have to have that play. If both dimensions were the same, then the camshaft wouldn't be greased or oiled, and it would be bad. You would get a lot of wear and tear. If the gap is too big, then you have another problem, because then you're going to lose oil pressure, and that's not good either. So it has to be about right. Now, I know it's 0.15 millimeters, but remember, it's like 0.075 on one side and 0.075 on the other side. If you add that up, then of course you're ending up about 0.15. Now, I just want to show you the oil channel. I'm having a plastic rod here. I want to make sure it's clean. It's going in the oil channel right here, and see, it's going to come out right there. See that? That's where it is. So this is the oil channel that's going to feed that bearing. Before installing the camshaft into the block, I want to make sure that it's absolutely clean. And then I'm going to oil it. And I'm going to oil it with an additive which you typically put into your oil system. Some people call it STP. This is another brand, and it's really thick oil. This is what I'd use. Now, you can use whatever you want. Some people use just engine oil. I like this. I'm just going to rub it on it, and then we can put that in. I'm going to do the same thing on all the cams, and then we should be good. Now, you might have noticed that I'm using kind of a weird brush. This is a nylon brush, so I don't want to have any hairs sticking into it from a normal brush. So let me do that for the whole cam, and then we slide it in. And we're also going to oil a bit the inside. There we go. So we're going to move the camshaft in now, very gently. You don't want to scratch anything. So we're going to move the camshaft in now, very gently. You don't want to scratch anything. There we go. So the camshaft is in now, and we can rotate it. As you can see, no play. Of course, the oil is really thick now. So now let's close it up. The next step is to install the locking panel for this crankshaft. Here we go. Push it back a bit. Strangely enough, there is no seal on this. All right. Don't over tighten it, but make it tight enough. And I want to lock the bolt in place by bending over this piece of metal. This is the distribution tooth wheel, which we can now put on, but I am not going to put this on permanently because I want to put a new one up, because these tooth, as you can see, are a bit worn out, so I might as well put a new one up. But for now, that will do the job. Lock it in place. And this is work we'll do later once we have the crankshaft. But you can see already things are turning very smoothly. So now let's have a quick look where the followers go. So here's the follower. We slide it in the bore and you will see it's going to rest on the camshaft. There we go. So I greased it a little bit, and hopefully when I turn the crankshaft you will actually see it coming up. And in the follower, you have the push rod that sits in like this. Now let me push that a bit, and you see how that follower will be pushed up while the crankshaft is turning. See that? That's all it does in terms of movement. Enough to lift the valves. Now, I'm not going to keep these followers in there for now, because they will fall out if I turn over the engine, because we still need to install the crankshaft. And those are all the followers together with their associated push rods. And you might see that I actually have numbered them, number 2, number 3. So in essence I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's how they came out of the motor. So I know the first one is the first cylinder, the first valve. And also the push rods are numbered. It is very important that you number your parts if you're going to reuse them, because these parts, number 2 and number 2, number 1 and number 1, and so on, they have matched wear and tear, and if you're going to mix things around, then you're going to create excessive wear. So keep things together. And this is a push rod, and before we put them in, we've got to make sure that they are absolutely straight. If they are not, or bent, then you have to replace them. And you're probably going to say, oh, there he is again with this piece of glass. But what you should use is a firm, flat surface, and then just roll that push rod on it. And you will feel it immediately if it's bent or not. Now this one is quite good, as you can see. So this rolls very smoothly. So this one is all right. So I'm going to check each one of them and check that the pocket is still intact, that you still have a proper edge around it. And equally check the ball side. This is the side that goes into the follower, that it is actually not damaged around. The next step is to install the conrods onto the pistons. That's the first thing. And then we'll install them into the sleeves. So for now, I'm going to put the cylinders away. And we'll focus on the pistons and the conrods. Now, what you will see on these conrods is that there is a high end and a low end. See, they are kind of what we call asymmetric. The reason why we have asymmetric conrods is very simple. When the piston is at stop dead center and the combustion takes place, the gases will explode and the piston will be violently be pushed down. In other words, the conrod is going to move, and then the crankshaft is going to turn, and it's going to turn like this while it's moving down. And a lot of forces will be placed on this side. And that's why this side of this conrod is bigger than the other side. So it is a lot stronger. If the conrod would have been mounted the other way around, then you could see when the piston is going down and it's turning the crankshaft, you're sitting on this shorter side where the joint is, where things are joined together, and it's not as strong. So that is the main reason why we have asymmetric conrods. but also the pin that holds the conrod onto the piston is a bit off-center. So it's also asymmetric. And that's why there is a pointer on the top of the piston, meaning this has to be positioned in the right direction. So the new pistons already have these segments fitted, so I'm not going to remove them and then reinstall them. So I'm going to use an old one to show you on how you can do that. This is the old piston, and I have 4 segments on it. A compression segment, another compression segment, the one which is a bit bigger with the groove in, this is the scraper, and there was a 4th one below. Segments are very hard, but they can also break easily, so if you're not careful, you might break them. But let me show you on how you can remove them from a piston. Now you can remove the segments with pliers and screwdrivers, but it's a hassle, and most likely you're going to break them or damage the piston itself. And that's why pliers like this are very handy. Over here is a grip, and that grip or that stand-up has to go in the gap of the segment. See the gap here? This is the gap, and we put that in. So you might want to push that segment a bit forward, and then you can put the pliers on. So let me show you on how that goes. And hopefully you can see it, because my hand might be in the way. And really, it's not very hard to do. And then you just squeeze it open, like so, and you can lift it off. There we go. And that's how easy it is to take a segment off. Let me take the second one off, which is the scraper. And let me see if I can do it like this for you, so you can see it from another angle. I'm going to push it a bit forward. And I'm going to make sure, open it up and take it off. There we go. And I'm going to do another one, the last one. Again, the same way. I'm going to push it a bit forward, squeeze it open, and I should be able to get it off. There we go. To put these segments back on, we just do the opposite. You put it in the plier. Squeeze it so it opens up, not too far. Take the piston and get it into place. There we go. And now that segment is nicely into place. So installing segments and removing segments isn't very hard, as long as you have the right tools, and this is the perfect tool for that. It's very cheap, guys. Believe me, it is worthwhile the investment if you go in to install segments or remove segments. So now let's get back to the engine. But besides that, the first thing now we need to do is to remove these pins out of those pistons. Let's dismantle one, and then you can see what I mean. So first of all, we have to remove that circlip which is fitted right there. Now you can use all kind of pliers for that. There are special pliers for circlips, but if you have some fine pliers, you can do it like this. And that comes out like that. Let's see if my hand is not too much in the way. So put the pliers in, squeeze, and pull out. To get the pin out, you will have to push it out. Now you can do this with different ways, but I made myself a piece of plastic that I can push it all the way through. You might want to use a socket, that's up to you. So let's try this out and see if we can get the pin out. See, it's coming. Now you might need a hammer in the beginning to hammer it slightly, but eventually it's just going to come out nicely. There we go. And that's how easy that works with a tool like this. So now it's time to put things together, and first of all, oil. And I'm going to put some oil up. Now you might have noticed that I'm not wearing gloves. And a lot of people will say you should wear gloves, but my hands or my fingers are already soaked with oil, so that's not an issue. Now, if you have sweaty hands, then I would wear gloves, because you don't want to have that acid from your fingers going onto the steel parts. All right, so we grease everything nicely in. Now the arrow is over here, so I need to leave it like this. And I already marked the conrod, which side it should point to. So that's both all pointing towards the camshaft side. And now I'm just going to slide that in gently That should not be that difficult to do. Line it up. Now, what I often do is use a second one, if I have one, on the other side to kind of align it. Guess this is not always easy. There we go. There we go. I should be able to tap it gently into place. You don't need to knock hard on any of this. Hopefully you can see it. I'm just going to knock that in a bit more until it's deep enough so I can put the circlip up. Alright, I think this is about right, and first of all I'm going to put the circlip up now on this side. There we go. And that's in. Verify that it's really in place, because you don't want this to come out, do you? Alright, now that looks good. And now we do the other side. And I will knock back gently that pin, not a lot, just a little bit, so I have enough space to put the circlip up. And now this piston is ready to be mounted in the cylinder. And here you see that gap, right? I don't want to have all the gaps of the segments in the same line, because then you're going to have blow through. So I'm going to rotate those so that I have them opposite. So the gap is here, the other gap is 180 degrees opposite on the second segment. Now the first two segments are the compression segments, and the last one here is the scraper. So I'm going to oil all this very well, because we need to stick it into the block and into the cylinder, and I don't want the cylinder to be damaged by no means. So I really want to oil this real well. Don't worry about having too much oil on this at this moment in time. It's okay to have all this oil. So normally you would like to put the piston from the top down, but as you can see, that doesn't fit. I can't get this conrod through, so I have to do it from the bottom side. Alright, so I'm going to oil equally the inside of the cylinder, and now we'll position the cylinder as it's going to go in the block. It's going to go like this, so I'm going to turn it over like that, and I want to have the arrow pointing to the right. That's where the camshaft will be. Now, you would normally expect that you would do it like this, right? And you can, but you should use a tool to install pistons. And as you can see, the piston wants to go in, but the segments are wider than the piston. So that, of course, is a bit of a problem. So you will have to squeeze those segments together, and therefore you have a tool like this, which is a kind of an elastic band in steel, which you're going to wrap around the piston, like so, and around the segments, and then we're going to squeeze this together, and then we can actually push the piston in. Now there's some notches on the bottom side, so make sure that the segments are still placed right, and I'm going to tighten that up now. Now you don't want to over tighten this either, but it should be tight enough. So let's see I can still move the piston around, and the segments are not fully compressed yet, so I can give it a little bit more. Alright, I think this is about right. So let's see if we can get the piston in. So we need to do it with little bits by little bits, and now the piston is in. Now, This is not the way I really like to do it, but I have no other choice because I have to fit the pistons into the cylinder from the bottom, and the big end of the conrods doesn't fit through the cylinder sleeve. So, you know, we have little choices on this. Now let's open this up, this guy. Alright, so now I can turn it a bit and put the piston in. Here we go. And that all looks pretty good. And yep. That's it. So this is the seal that we need at the bottom of the cylinder sleeves, and we measured it out in the previous video. So let me put that in. So let's see. Okay, there we go. So there's one way it goes in, and now we can take care of it and push the piston up a little bit at least. There we go. With the piston all the way to the top. And we need to make sure that the arrow is pointing towards the camshaft. And that's cylinder number 1, which is in place. So now we'll do all the other cylinders. I've got all 4 sleeves in place, and also the pistons, and the pistons are pointing towards the actual camshaft, where it's supposed to be based on the arrow that we have on the pistons. And now I need to hold these sleeves into place, because if I'm going to flip over the block, they will fall out, because normally they're held in place by the cylinder head. So I'm going to use some bolts and some washers to hold them, because I still have to connect the conrods to the crankshaft as soon as I have the crankshaft. Now I'm not going to tighten that down too hard, that's not the purpose of it. Just enough so the sleeves can't fall out when we flip over the block. So I'm going to put my plastic cover on again, so nothing gets polluted or dirty while we're working on it. And now I can flip over the block. So in the next episode we're going to install the crankshaft, but we have all the big ends ready to do so. And I numbered them 1, 2, 3, and 4, because I have to take these parts off and I have to put bearings inside to the right size. And also marked an arrow on it so I know exactly which direction they point towards the camshaft, which is on this side all the way in the bottom. I'm going to put some grease up and my plastic so I can protect the engine or the block until I have the crankshaft, because that, I don't know how long that will take. I hope I get it by next week, but you never know. A little bit of grease on plastic always works perfect. It's never going to fall off. All right. So now it's time to have a look at the oil pump, and here it is. Now this car doesn't have an oil filter like we know it on modern cars. It has actually a built-in oil filter, and here it is. Pretty weird stuff, but I guess that's how they did it in the old days, and you can't get to it without taking the carter pan off. And it's built on a mace, and this is the mace, and there is a second mace in that filter, and that's it. So if they have to wash out this filter, you have to take the carter off. So I can imagine that wasn't done a lot in the past, so no wonder we had all this dirt in this engine. And this is the oil filter fitted inside the carter of the engine. And it consists out of a couple of mazes, as you can see. And this is the first maze that will filter stuff out of the oil. And then there's a second level, which is exactly the same, that will filter out again particles. And then you have the last part. And from here on, it gets in the oil pump. And this is the oil pump. On this side, we connect the filter we just looked at, and it's a third wheel based pump, and it's driven by the camshaft, which is this shaft over here. And on top of it, you're going to have the distributor. Anyhow, let's have a closer look at the inside of this pump and see what we have to do with it. Now, I already took out the screws, and then this part can come off like this. Just going to leave it like so. And now we can take this part off. And now you see the two tooth wheels. Now, one is loose and the other one is fitted onto the shaft. And this is a tooth wheel based oil pump, and while the shaft is rotating, it will create a vacuum on the primary tooth wheel. Oil will be sucked in to the oil filter, carried along in the cavities in between the teeth, and then it gets over here and it will be squeezed out by the second tooth wheel, which the tooth will fill the cavity, and that's how you get oil pressure. Now, this pump should deliver between 2 and 2.5 kilograms of oil pressure on a warm and running engine. So we'll have to check that. You can see that these tooth wheels have wear and tear on it, and there's quite some play on it already. And you can imagine that we'll lose some oil pressure because of that, and because oil will escape where it shouldn't escape. So that's something we'll need to verify, and we're going to replace that with new tooth wheels. I already ordered them, so we can install those and then see how it goes. On the side here we have we can regulate the oil pressure. Let me try to see if I can show you that. I can undo this bolt, and inside we have a spring. There we go. This is the spring and the ball. I almost lost it. So this is this ball, and that sits on top of the spring, and that's kind of the pressure regulation. So that's what we're going to use to regulate the pressure. So let us take this pump further apart, and then we'll fit on the new tooth wheels, and then we're going to verify it and check the pressure and adjust the pressure. You need to knock out two little pins in the top, and then you can take off this top part here which the distributor is sitting on. Now the shaft is free, and you can take off the shaft. There we go. And then you can take off the tooth wheel on the primary drive shaft. And be careful with this tooth wheel here, because you have these little clips that fit here. I already took them off ahead of us. And then inside you have this lock. So remember that. That's the one you need to pay attention to. And then you can take everything off in the other direction. So now let's have a look on the old tooth wheel and the new ones and see if we see any difference. So these are the old ones and these are the new ones. And I think it does make a bit of difference. So these are the old tooth wheels. I'm going to get rid of those, and we'll install the new ones. So first of all, I'm going to put plenty of oil, motor oil, inside the pump, because I want to have everything greased from the start. Well, it's an oil pump after all, so a bit of grease doesn't matter. Then I'm going to push this long rod back through it, and again I'm going to oil it. So now I will put the drive shaft in, but first of all I'm going to connect the primary tooth wheel to it and make sure it's in the right direction. There's a big opening and a small opening. The big opening has to be towards the bottom. So let me stick it on there. There we go. Now let's slide it in. Now I need to find out the right direction, because this Woodruff has to fit right. And I need to find out where that is, because I just can't spot it like that. But all in a sudden it will slide into it. There we go. That's it. I got it. And now I need to put those two clips up on the front here. It's all small stuff with my big fingers. Oops, don't push that too far back. No, well, not good. Lost it now. Okay, it's back. Make sure the bottom part doesn't fall off. And then we put the second part up as well. And trying to do this and not being in the way of the camera is not always that easy. But that's done. And now I can push that and everything is locked in place. And now we can push it all the way back in. And now I'm going to put up the second tooth wheel. There we go. And that's how simple that is. And now it should be able to turn. All right, this feels good. I'm going to oil it a bit more. At the end, this will be plenty of oil anyway inside, so don't worry about it. I got a new gasket that we can put in place. And then I can put the panel up, like so. And now I can mount the bigger piece onto that. However, this gasket is gone, so I will have to get another one, and I couldn't find one, so we'll have to make one. So we'll make the gasket ourselves, but before we can do so, I need to get the old one off as complete as possible, because I want to use it as a template. I'm going to try to keep it as intact as possible. All right, and here it is. So with this, I can make a new one without any problems. I'm going to make the new gasket out of gasket paper, and this gasket paper is 0.5 millimeters thick, and you buy it on a roll, and it's very cheap. So if you can't find a certain gasket, don't worry about it, you can build it yourself. So I'm going to use this and mark it on here. So I can then cut it out. There we go. And also need to mark the openings. Oops, you don't want to have it slip like that. And these are hollow punches that I'm going to use to knock out the holes in that joint. We have reconditioned the fuel pump, we put new tooth wheels in, we also created new gaskets, and now it's time to verify the pump for its pressure and actually adjust the pressure. Adjusting the pressure is on the side here. You remember that I showed you the spring and the little metal ball. That's what we're going to use to adjust the pressure, but I have to put up a manometer to this hose right here, or this tube. And then I have to create an opening of 2.5 millimeters, because that's kind of the flow that this pump should be able to deliver at 2.5 kilograms at an opening of 2.5 mil. So let me put all this together and then we'll do that test. And if all that is done, then we are finished for the day. Now it's time to check the oil pump, and I placed the oil pump in a bath. I'm going to pour some oil in now at operating temperature, which is about 60 degrees centigrade. There we go. And let's see if that temperature is correct. So the temperature is around 63 degrees centigrade. Now it's time to check the oil pump, and the oil pump should deliver a pressure but also a certain volume. Now this oil pump is supposed to deliver 2 to 2.5 kilograms of pressure with an orifice of 2.5 millimeters. And over here I installed a meter, a pressure meter, and in the bottom I put a plug up with a hole of 2.5 millimeters, which is my orifice. So oil will be pumped up the basin, it will come through this hose, and then it will zipple back out to the bottom. Now I will have to adjust the pressure on that one specific bolt that's now inside it, so I have to lift it out and then adjust it a bit. But let's see what this is going to give us. Now the pressure should be around 2 to 2.5 kilograms, as I said before. However, that is only at 750 to 1000 RPM. This is a small plastic tool which I can use on top of the oil pump to drive it, and in the middle I have a split pin, so that will fall into the gap on the top of the shaft of the oil pump, and then the surrounding part will nicely sit around it so it's not going to flip out. And of course you need to mount it on a drill. And that's the top of the shaft of the fuel pump, and you can see this little cutout here. That's where I want my split pin to fall into. And then I can drive the oil pump like so. So I'm going to turn the pump a little bit and have a look on the orifice in the bottom. See how that comes out? I have taped up the meter because otherwise it's going to flip up way too high and then you can't see the reading. So let's run it up to about 1000 RPMs. On the last run we had about 2 kilograms. I'm going to give it a bit more by adjusting this nut over here. Not too much, but a little bit more. And now we try it again. Because that's where the pressure relief valve is. And let's see. So, let's try it again. That's looking quite all right. So folks, this is the end of this video, and I hope you enjoyed part number 3 as much as I did. And I would like to thank you for all the comments that have been made before and for all the subscriptions that I've received. More is to come. As soon as I have the crankshaft, we'll mount the crankshaft into the block and we mount the oil pump, and then we'll start working on the cylinder head. Have a good day. Bye-bye.